The fluorescent lights of Walmart cast their cold glow across the parking lot as Catherine Sullivan pushed her shopping cart toward the rusted Ford F-150 at the far end of the lot. It was 6:45 p.m. on a Friday, and the November chill had settled over Wilmington, North Carolina, like a thin blanket of unease. She was 26 years old, blonde hair falling past her shoulders, blue eyes that had once scanned desert horizons through rifle scopes, now focused on loading groceries into the bed of a truck that had seen better days. To anyone watching, she was just another small-town girl finishing her shift, heading home to a quiet evening. Nobody knew that 3 years ago, Commander Catherine "Reaper" Sullivan had been one of the most decorated female Navy SEALs in American history. Nobody knew that she was supposed to be dead. The cart's wheels squeaked against the asphalt. Catherine moved with a casualness that was entirely calculated, every gesture designed to appear ordinary. But her peripheral vision never stopped scanning. Old habits didn't just die hard. They didn't die at all. She heard them before she saw them. 3 male voices, loud with alcohol and entitlement, echoing across the parking lot from the direction of the sports bar 2 buildings over. "Yo, check it out," one of them called. "Walmart girl." Catherine's hands continued loading bags, but her heartbeat didn't change. 62 beats per minute, the same rhythm she'd maintained during a 1,000-yard shot in Helmand Province. 3 men approached, college age, maybe 21 or 22. The leader stood 6'5", maybe 260, with the thick neck of a lineman and the swagger of someone who'd never been told no. His Letterman jacket read, "UNC Wilmington Football." His friends flanked him, both over 6 feet, both over 200 pounds. "Hey, sweetheart," the big one said, his breath reeking of cheap beer. "Need help with those bags?" Catherine straightened, turned to face them with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "No, thank you. I'm good." The big one stepped closer. "Come on, don't be like that. Name's Brock. Brock Hadley. Maybe you've heard of me? Starting linebacker?" "I haven't." Catherine turned back to her truck. Brock moved faster than she expected for someone his size, stepping into her path, blocking her from the driver's door. His friends spread out, forming a loose semicircle. The one on the right held up his phone, filming. "That's rude," Brock said, his voice hardening. "I'm trying to be nice here." "I appreciate it," Catherine said quietly, "but I need to go." She tried to step around him. His hands shot out, grabbed her arm. Not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough to stop her. Hard enough to stake a claim. "You're not going anywhere till I get your number." Catherine looked down at his hand on her arm. 3 years ago, she would have broken his wrist in 3 places before he could blink. 3 years ago, she was still a SEAL. Now she was just a ghost trying to stay dead. "Let go," she said. "Now." "Or what?" Brock's grin widened. "You gonna call the cops?" "Go ahead, my dad's a lawyer. I own this town." Catherine pulled her arm free, back toward her truck. Her mind was already calculating distances, angles, threat assessment. 3 targets, all larger, all younger, all convinced she was nothing. They had no idea they were standing 3 feet from a woman who'd killed 17 men in close-quarters combat. "Just walk away," Catherine said. "Please." "Please?" Brock laughed, looked at his friends. "She said please. That's cute." He lunged forward, grabbed her ponytail, yanked hard. Pain shot through Catherine's scalp as her head snapped back. "Stay right there, bitch." Brock's voice was loud enough to echo off the surrounding cars. "You think you're too good for me? You think?" Catherine's shopping bags hit the ground, and the woman who'd been dead for 3 years came roaring back to life. Her left hand shot up, grabbed Brock's wrist where it held her hair. Her right hand simultaneously trapped his elbow. She didn't pull away. She rotated. A figure-4 wrist lock, the kind that Master Chief Mike Delaney had drilled into her when she was 15 years old, standing in his compound in the Outer Banks, learning that size didn't matter if you understood leverage. Brock's grip released. His wrist made a sound like a tree branch snapping. He opened his mouth to scream. Catherine pivoted, her elbow driving into his sternum, precisely at the xiphoid process. The scream died as all the air left his lungs. He bent forward, gasping. Catherine's knee came up. It met his face at the exact moment his head came down. Cartilage shattered. Blood sprayed. Brock Hadley, starting linebacker, 260 pounds of muscle and entitlement, fell backward like a puppet with cut strings. 3 seconds had elapsed. Tyler, the friend on the left, charged. He was fast, faster than Brock. But Catherine had fought men trained by the same instructors who'd trained Delta Force. She sidestepped, her foot sweeping low, catching his lead ankle at the precise moment of weight transfer. Physics in timing. That's all combat really was. Tyler crashed face first into a Honda Civic. The car alarm exploded into the night. Blood streamed from his forehead where it had met the side mirror. 7 seconds. Cody, the one who'd been filming, just stood there, phone still raised, mouth open. Catherine walked toward him. Not fast, not aggressive, just steady. "Delete the video," she said quietly. "What the?" His voice cracked. "Lady, you just..." "Delete it." Cody's thumb fumbled across the screen. Okay, it's gone, it's..." Catherine took the phone from his hand, checked the recently deleted folder, permanently erased the file, handed it back. "Leave." He ran. 11 seconds from the moment Brock had grabbed her hair to the moment Cody's footsteps faded into the darkness. Catherine stood in the parking lot, surrounded by 2 unconscious men and scattered groceries, her chest rising and falling with breaths that were still measured, still controlled. Her hands didn't shake. That was the problem with SEAL training. Your body never forgot what it had been built to do. She looked around. The parking lot was emptier than she'd thought. No witnesses in immediate sight. But she could see the security camera mounted on the lamppost 30 yards away, its red light blinking steadily. She'd been compromised. Catherine loaded her groceries with quick efficiency, started the truck, drove out of the lot without looking back. In her rearview mirror, she saw someone running from the Walmart entrance toward the fallen men. By the time she reached the highway, her phone was already buzzing with news alerts. By the time she reached her trailer on the outskirts of town, the video was already viral. Because Cody had lied. He hadn't deleted anything. He'd uploaded it to his friend first. Catherine sat in her truck outside the sagging, single-wide trailer that had been home for 3 years, watching her phone light up with notifications. The video had been viewed 200,000 times, then 500,000, then 1 million. The title read, "Tiny Blonde Destroys 3 Massive Men in 11 Seconds. Who is she?" The comments were exactly what she expected. That's military training. Look at the way she moves, 0 wasted motion. Former Marine? Army Ranger? No, that's SEAL shit. I'd bet my life on it. Someone would recognize her. CIA, NSA. Someone with access to facial recognition and classified personnel files. Someone would connect the dots between the dead SEAL commander from 3 years ago and the Walmart cashier who moved like she'd been trained to kill. Catherine closed her eyes, rested her head against the steering wheel. She'd lasted 3 years. 3 years of silence and safety and slow healing. 3 years of trying to forget the feeling of sand in her teeth and blood on her hands. 3 years of trying to outrun the ghosts of 8 men who died because someone had leaked their mission. The knock on her truck window came at exactly 2:30 a.m. Catherine's hand found the Glock 19 she kept under the driver's seat before her eyes were fully open. She'd fallen asleep in the truck, exhausted from the adrenaline crash, from the weight of knowing her carefully constructed life had just evaporated. The man outside her window was old, 70, maybe more. Silver hair cut military short, shoulders that had once been broad now slightly stooped with age, but eyes that still burned with the intensity of someone who'd spent decades making life-or-death decisions. Catherine knew those eyes. She'd known them since she was 5 years old. She lowered the window. "Hello, Katie," Master Chief Mike Delaney said. Nice work on those boys. Your daddy would have been proud. Mike, Catherine's voice cracked on his name. How did I find you? Kid, you just became the most famous mystery woman on the internet. 15 million views and counting. He nodded toward the trailer. We should probably talk inside, unless you want CNN showing up at dawn. Catherine looked at the phone in her lap. 17 million views now. They sat across from each other in the cramped trailer, Catherine on the sagging couch, Mike in the chair that wobbled if you shifted weight too fast. He brought coffee from the 24-hour gas station, and they drank it black, the way SEALs always did. You look good, Mike said, considering you're supposed to be dead. I was doing fine until tonight. No, Mike shook his head. You were surviving. There's a difference. The trailer's walls were bare except for one photograph, carefully framed, sitting on the kitchen counter where Catherine could see it every morning. A young man in navy dress whites, SEAL trident gleaming on his chest, smile bright with the confidence of someone who'd never met a challenge he couldn't overcome. Captain Patrick Hawk Sullivan, Catherine's father, killed in Grenada on October 25, 1983, 3 years before Catherine was born. They're going to come for you, Mike said. CIA, NSA. Someone's already running your face through recognition software. By morning, they'll know you're alive. So I run, again. To where? Mike leaned forward. Katie, you've been running for 3 years. Running from Syria. Running from the memory of 8 good men dying while you lived. Running from the questions nobody will answer about who betrayed your team. Catherine's hands tightened around the coffee cup. I can't go back. I'm not asking you to. Mike reached into his jacket, pulled out a folder, set it on the coffee table between them. I'm asking you to look at this. Catherine didn't touch it. What is it? Your father's death, the real story, not the sanitized version they put in his service record. The coffee cup trembled in Catherine's hands. Mike, don't. Your daddy didn't die in a firefight with Cuban forces. Mike's voice was hard, certain. I was there. I saw him fall. And I've spent 41 years trying to prove what I knew in my gut. Patrick Sullivan was murdered. The trailer seemed to shrink around them. Catherine set down her coffee before she dropped it. Murdered? By who? By someone on our side. Mike opened the folder, turned it so Catherine could see. Look at the autopsy report. I got it through FOIA last year. Took me 23 years of requests, but they finally released it. Catherine forced herself to look. Medical examiner's report, dated November 1983. Detailed drawings of entry and exit wounds. Technical language about bullet trajectories and tissue damage. Entry wound, left shoulder, Mike said, pointing. Back to front, downward angle of 30 degrees. Your father was advancing forward when he was shot. From behind. Catherine's eyes tracked across the page. Caliber? 45 ACP. That's not a Cuban weapon. That's American. That's what SEALs carried in 1983. The implications settled over Catherine like a heavy fog. Someone on his team. I've got the team roster here, 12 operators. I've tracked all of them over the years. Most are dead now, natural causes mostly, but one of them went on to have a very interesting career. Mike pulled out another document. Lieutenant Vanessa Cortland, 24 years old in 1983. Position during the firefight? 20 feet behind your father. Perfect angle for that downward trajectory. Catherine stared at the photograph clipped to the service record. A young woman, dark hair, intense eyes, wearing navy fatigues. Vanessa Cortland, Catherine repeated. I don't recognize the name. You would if I used her married name. Vanessa Blackwood, currently serving as Deputy Director of Operations for the CIA. The air left Catherine's lungs. You're saying a CIA Deputy Director murdered my father 41 years ago? I'm saying it's possible. I'm saying the angles match. I'm saying she's the only one who could have had that shot. And I'm saying your grandfather, Colonel Brennan Sullivan, died in a car accident in Berlin in 1989 while investigating your father's death. Mike pulled out one more document. Accident report. Single vehicle collision. No witnesses. Brennan was OSS in World War II, CIA after that. One of the founders of SAD. He didn't die in random car accidents. He was one of the best defensive drivers in the agency. Taught the course at the farm for 15 years. Catherine pushed back from the table, stood, paced the narrow trailer. Her mind was racing through scenarios, possibilities, the kind of tactical analysis she'd done 1,000 times before missions. Why, she finally asked, why would Vanessa kill Dad? That's the question I've been trying to answer for 41 years. Mike closed the folder. And 3 hours ago, I got an answer. Sort of. He pulled out his phone, showed Catherine an encrypted message. This came through an old CIA back channel I still have access to. Anonymous sender. Catherine read, Sullivan was close. Ghost directive. 1983. Tell his daughter. She needs to know. Ghost directive, Catherine said. What is that? I don't know, but someone thinks it's connected to your father's death, and they think you need to know about it. A long silence filled the trailer. Outside, the first hints of dawn were touching the horizon. The video, Catherine said quietly, that's why you're here. You knew it would flush me out. You knew they'd come for me. They're already coming. Mike stood, moved to the window, carefully shifted the curtain an inch. Black SUV pulled up across the street about 5 minutes before I knocked. 2 occupants. They're just watching, waiting for morning to make contact. Catherine moved beside him, looked out. Sure enough, a dark vehicle sat under a dead streetlight, just visible in the pre-dawn gray. CIA? That would be my guess. Catherine stepped back from the window, her mind shifting into operational mode. Threat assessment, exit strategies, asset evaluation. What do you want me to do? She asked. I want you to listen to what they have to say, because I think they're going to offer you exactly what we need. A way back in, a mission. And missions give you access. Access gives you answers. Access to what? To the truth about your father, about your grandfather, about Ghost Directive, about Syria, and who betrayed your team. Mike turned to face her fully. Katie, you've been dead for 3 years, but the people who killed your team, the people who killed your father, they're still out there, still breathing, still winning. Catherine looked again at the photograph of her father. Young, confident, dead before she was born. She'd spent her entire life trying to live up to a ghost. And if it's a trap, she asked, then we spring it, together. Mike's weathered face creased into something that might have been a smile. Your daddy and I made each other a promise in 1983. If one of us died, the other would look after family. I've been keeping that promise for 41 years. I'm not stopping now. The knock came at 7 a.m. exactly. 3 sharp raps, official and unmistakable. Catherine opened the door. 2 people stood on the sagging wooden steps. The man was mid-50s, gray suit, the kind of face that forgot how to smile somewhere around his 1,000th classified briefing. The woman was younger, late 20s, British accent evident in her posture before she even spoke. Commander Sullivan, the man said, my name is Alexander Cordell, Deputy Director of Intelligence, CIA. This is Lieutenant Grace Remington, on loan from British SAS. May we come in? Catherine didn't move from the doorway. I'm not a commander anymore. I'm dead, remember? Officially, yes. Cordell's expression didn't change. Unofficially, you're exactly what we need. For what? For a conversation, 10 minutes of your time. After that, if you want us to leave, we'll leave. You have my word. Catherine glanced back at Mike, who'd positioned himself in the kitchen, hand resting casually near where his 1911.45 would be if he were carrying, which he definitely was. She stepped aside. They sat in the cramped living space, Cordell and Grace on the couch, Catherine and Mike across from them. Nobody offered coffee. This wasn't that kind of visit. Cordell opened a tablet, turned it so Catherine could see. Operation Nightingale. Target, Russian defector, currently in Crimea. Ex-KGB Colonel Dmitry Volkov, 73 years old. He's requesting extraction and asylum. Catherine didn't touch the tablet. Why are you telling me this? Because Volkov specifically requested you. He doesn't know me. He knows your father and your grandfather. He claims they were investigating something in 1982 and 1983, something called Ghost Directive. He claims your father was killed because he got too close to the truth. The trailer went very still. Cordell continued. Volkov says he has names, evidence, details about a KGB program that embedded sleeper agents in the U.S. military and government during the Cold War. He says some of those agents are still active, still operational. Catherine's voice was carefully neutral. And what does he want in exchange? Asylum, witness protection, a chance to die peacefully instead of from polonium poisoning. When? 72 hours. After that, Russian intelligence will move him to Moscow. We'll never see him again. Catherine leaned back, studied Cordell's face. You have hundreds of operators. Why me? Because Volkov won't talk to anyone else. He says if we send anyone but Patrick Sullivan's daughter, he'll assume we're compromised and he'll disappear. Permanently. Mike spoke for the first time. That's convenient. Almost like someone knew Catherine would surface right about now. Almost like someone was waiting for a viral video to give them an excuse to bring her in. Cordell met Mike's gaze without flinching. Master Chief Delaney, your service record is impressive. So is your reputation for paranoia. Paranoia keeps you alive in our line of work. Indeed, Cordell turned back to Catherine. This is a simple extraction. You get Volkov out. We get information. You get answers about your father. Nothing is ever simple, Catherine said. And the mission handler? Who runs oversight? Cordell's pause was almost imperceptible. Almost. Deputy Director Vanessa Blackwood. She personally requested command authority. No, Catherine stood. Get out. Cordell remained seated. Commander, the woman you want running this mission is the same woman who was standing 20 feet behind my father when he took a .45 round to the back. You want me to walk into a trap with her holding the strings? No, absolutely not. Grace Remington spoke, her British accent crisp and calm. Commander Sullivan, with respect, if Director Blackwood wanted you dead, she'd have already made that happen. You've been in Wilmington for 3 years. You think they didn't know? Catherine turned to her. Then why wait? Because until last night, you were no threat. You were dead, buried, forgotten. But now? Grace gestured to Catherine's phone, still buzzing with notifications. Now you're a sensation. Now questions are being asked. Now they have to bring you in or risk someone else connecting the dots. So this is cleanup? This is opportunity. Cordell stood, carefully, keeping his hands visible. You want answers about your father. We want answers about Ghost Directive. Volkov has both. Yes, Director Blackwood is involved. Yes, that's complicated. But it also means she'll be watching. And people who are watching can be watched in return. Catherine looked at Mike. Approach. I pick the weapons. Blackwood, approach. I pick the weapons. Blackwood provides resources, but she doesn't make operational decisions. Agreed, Cordell said immediately. Too immediately. And Mike comes with me. Commander, Master Chief Delaney is 71 years old. Non-negotiable. Cordell looked at Mike, who smiled without warmth. I can still outshoot anyone in your building, Deputy Director. Want to bet on it? A long silence. Then Cordell nodded. Fine, you'll need 2 more operators. Lieutenant Remington is assigned. Pick one more. Catherine thought for exactly 3 seconds. Bridget O'Malley, Navy Intelligence, currently stationed at Norfolk. Grace raised an eyebrow. I know Petty Officer O'Malley. Excellent choice. Speaks 5 languages. 6, Catherine corrected. She added Farsi since you last worked with her. Cordell closed his tablet. Wheels up in 18 hours. Ramstein Air Base, Germany. Full briefing en route. He handed Catherine a secure phone. This is your new encrypted line. Use it to coordinate with your team. Don't use anything else. And Commander? What? The video. We're scrubbing it. By noon, it'll be gone from every platform. Catherine Sullivan stays dead. This mission is off books. If it goes wrong, we can't acknowledge you. Story of my life, Catherine said. After they left, Catherine and Mike stood in the trailer's doorway, watching the black SUV pull away into the early morning traffic. It's a trap, Mike said quietly. I know. We're walking in blind. I know. Your father would tell you to walk away, to stay dead, to stay safe. Catherine looked at the photograph on the counter. Young Patrick Sullivan, frozen forever at 28, never knowing he'd have a daughter, never knowing she'd spend her whole life trying to understand why he died. My father would tell me to finish what he started, she said, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Mike pulled his truck keys from his pocket. Then let's go shopping. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. And I know a guy who has access to the kind of weapons that aren't in any official armory. Mike, Catherine said as they walked toward his truck. When this is over, when we have the truth about Dad, about Grandpa, about all of it, what do we do with it? The old Master Chief opened the driver's door, paused, looked back at her across the hood. Same thing your father would have done. Same thing every Sullivan who ever wore the uniform would have done. We make it right, no matter what it costs. Catherine climbed into the passenger seat. As Mike started the engine, her phone buzzed one last time. The video had been removed from every platform, just as Cordell promised. 17 million views, vanished like they'd never existed. Catherine Sullivan was dead again, but Reaper was very much alive, and she was going hunting. The C-130 Hercules banked hard over the Black Sea, and Catherine felt the familiar press of G-forces against her chest. 28,000 feet below, the waters churned dark and cold under a moonless sky. Inside the cargo hold, red lights cast everything in shades of blood. She checked her altimeter, 18 minutes to jump. Across from her, Master Chief Mike Delaney sat with the stillness of a man who'd made hundreds of combat jumps. His eyes were closed, but Catherine knew he wasn't sleeping. He was running the mission in his head, the way he'd taught her to do when she was 16 years old, practicing with his old SEAL team in the Outer Banks. Lieutenant Grace Remington methodically checked her oxygen system, her movements precise and economical. British SAS to her core, Grace radiated the kind of competence that came from years of making hard decisions in impossible situations. She caught Catherine's eye and nodded once. Ready. Petty Officer Bridget O'Malley hunched over her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard even as the aircraft shuddered through turbulence. 24 years old, Boston Irish, with red hair pulled back in a tight bun and freckles that made her look even younger. But her eyes held the sharp intelligence of someone who'd cracked encryption codes that had stumped analysts twice her age. 2 minutes, the loadmaster called over the intercom. Catherine stood, checked her gear one final time. MC-5 parachute, altimeter, oxygen mask, GPS unit, and backup compass. The compass had belonged to her grandfather, carried through World War II, Korea, and a dozen CIA operations that would never be declassified. Mike had given it to her 6 hours ago at Ramstein Air Base, pressing it into her palm without words. The cargo ramp began to lower. Wind screamed into the hold, drowning out everything except the thunder of engines and Catherine's own heartbeat. She watched the altimeter, 28,000 feet, negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit outside. They'd be under canopy for 45 minutes, gliding 20 miles through hostile airspace to a beach 2 miles from target. Hey-ho insertion. High altitude, high opening. The kind of infiltration that required absolute precision and left zero room for error. The loadmaster raised his hand, 5 fingers. 4, 3, 2. Catherine stepped into the darkness. The free fall lasted 3 seconds, just long enough for her body to remember what it felt like to give yourself completely to gravity and faith. Then her ram air chute deployed with a crack that she felt through her entire skeleton, and suddenly she was flying. She found Mike's position immediately, then Grace, then Bridget. They formed up in a diamond pattern, Catherine at point, using the GPS to guide them toward the coordinates burned into her memory. Below, the Black Sea stretched endless and dark. Above, stars wheeled in patterns her grandfather had used to navigate before GPS existed. The wind at altitude was brutal, tearing at her jumpsuit, trying to push her off course. Catherine made constant corrections, subtle inputs to her steering toggles, keeping them on the glide path. Her oxygen mask fogged with each breath. Her fingers were going numb despite the insulated gloves. This was the part civilians never understood about special operations. The movies showed the gunfights, the explosions, the heroic last stands. They never showed the hours of cold and discomfort and grinding physical misery that preceded every moment of action. They never showed what it took just to reach the fight. 40 minutes into the glide, Catherine's GPS showed they were 3 miles from the coast. She keyed her radio. 2 clicks. The team acknowledged. They began their descent, losing altitude gradually, aiming for the narrow beach that satellite imagery had shown was rocky and isolated. Catherine spotted the coastline, a darker line against the dark water. She adjusted her approach, aimed for the precise strip of sand that would give them cover from the coastal road. Her altimeter spun down. 1,000 feet, 500, 200. The ground rushed up. Catherine flared her chute, felt the sudden deceleration, touched down on sand that was harder than she'd expected. She hit the release, and the parachute collapsed behind her. 15 seconds later, Mike landed beside her, then Grace, then Bridget. They were in Crimea, Russian-controlled territory. 4 Americans with no backup and no extraction plan if things went wrong. Catherine pulled off her oxygen mask, tasted salt air and petroleum. They were near Sevastopol, one of Russia's most important naval bases. In the distance, she could hear the low rumble of ships and the occasional blast of a horn. Mike was already moving, gathering parachutes, stuffing them into a waterproof bag that he'd bury in the sand. Grace pulled out her encrypted tablet, confirmed their position. Bridget assembled a compact antenna, began scanning local communications. FSB chatter, Bridget whispered, her Boston accent somehow more pronounced in the darkness. 2 units, call signs Raven and Wolf. They're coordinating patrols in Sevastopol proper. Any mention of us? Catherine asked. Not yet, but they're definitely looking for something. Increased alert status as of 6 hours ago. Catherine pulled a waterproof bag from her vest, opened it, began removing civilian clothes. Jeans, a dark sweater, a worn jacket that could belong to any local. The others did the same, transforming from operators to ordinary people in under 3 minutes. The weapons cache was exactly where the brief had indicated, buried under rocks 50 meters up the beach. Catherine dug it out while Grace kept watch. Inside the weatherproof container, HK-416 rifles, Sig Sauer P226 pistols, extra magazines, radio equipment, and a surprise. A wooden case, old and battered, with M. Delaney stenciled on the side. Mike opened it, lifted out an M40A3 sniper rifle. His face in the starlight looked 10 years younger. Cordell came through, he said quietly. This is my personal weapon. I thought it was in storage at Quantico. Cordell wants this to work, Catherine said. Question is why? They moved inland, following a goat path that wound through scrub brush toward the outskirts of Sevastopol. The city glowed on the horizon, thousands of lights reflecting off the harbor. They walked for 90 minutes, saw no one, spoke only when necessary. The target building appeared at 4:30 a.m. a five-story Soviet-era apartment block, half the windows dark, graffiti covering the lower floors. According to the brief, Dmitry Volkov was in apartment 4D, guarded by 4 to 6 FSB agents. Mike found his overwatch position in an abandoned factory 400 yards west. He set up the M40A3, drew a range card by penlight, checked the wind. "I have eyes on the building," he reported over the radio. 4 tangos visible, 2 at the main entrance, 2 roaming the perimeter. Catherine, Grace, and Bridget approached from the south, moving through shadows, using the skills that had been drilled into them through thousands of hours of training. Bridget stayed back with her laptop and antenna, monitoring communications. Catherine and Grace moved to the building's south entrance. The lock was Soviet-era, simple for someone who'd been taught lockpicking by a man who'd broken into East German facilities during the Cold War. Catherine had it open in 40 seconds. They entered a stairwell that smelled of urine and decay, began climbing to the 4th floor. The hallway was dimly lit by emergency lights that flickered and hummed. Apartment 4D was at the far end. The door stood slightly ajar. Catherine's hand moved to her SIG P226. That was wrong. Every instinct screamed that was wrong. She signaled Grace. "Possible ambush." Grace nodded, moved to the opposite side of the doorway. They entered in perfect synchronization. Catherine left, Grace right, weapons up, scanning. The apartment was small: kitchen, living room, bedroom, bathroom. Soviet-era furniture, worn and sagging. And on the living room floor, a body. Male, early 70s, gray hair, 3 days of beard growth. Single gunshot wound to the forehead, powder burns suggesting close range. The blood was fresh, still tacky, under 2 hours old. Catherine knelt, checked the man's pockets, found a Ukrainian passport. Dmitry Volkov, age 73. They were too late, or exactly on time for something else. Grace searched the body systematically while Catherine covered the hallway. Grace's hands moved to the man's shoes, then stopped. "Commander," she whispered, inside his sock, a micro SD card, smaller than a fingernail, wrapped in plastic. Catherine took it, pocketed it. Whatever Volkov had known, whatever he'd discovered about Ghost Directive, it was on this card. The bathroom door exploded open. An FSB agent emerged, AK-12 raised, shouting in Russian. Catherine didn't think. Muscle memory took over. 2 shots, center mass, the SIG P226 bucking in her hands. The suppressor reduced the shots to harsh coughs. The agent went down. "Contact," Catherine said into her radio, already moving toward the door. 2 more FSB agents appeared in the hallway. Grace threw a flashbang, and Catherine felt the concussion even through her eyelids. They moved through the smoke, Grace firing controlled bursts from her MP5. Catherine put down 1 agent with a headshot. Grace dropped the other. "Reaper, I count 8 more tangos entering the building," Mike's voice crackled over the radio. "You're about to be very popular." "Copy." "Grace, rooftop access?" "End of the hall, marked exit." They ran. Behind them, boots thundered on the stairs. Ahead, a metal door with a push bar. Catherine hit it at full speed, burst onto the roof. Dawn was beginning to touch the eastern horizon, turning the sky from black to deep blue. 4 FSB agents were already on the roof, having come up the opposite stairwell. They raised their weapons. Catherine dove right, Grace left. Bullets chewed into the rooftop where they'd been standing. "Mike," Catherine said into her radio, "now would be good." 400 yards away, in the abandoned factory, Mike Delaney settled the M40A3's crosshairs on the first target. Controlled breathing, steady trigger pull. The rifle spoke. The first shot arrived before the sound. 1 FSB agent dropped, chest blooming red. Mike worked the bolt, acquired the second target. The shot came 2 seconds later. Another agent fell. The remaining 2 dove for cover behind an air conditioning unit. Catherine used the moment to move, closing the distance firing on the move. She dropped one agent as he leaned out from cover. The fourth retreated back into the stairwell. "Exfil route," Grace called. "East side, fire escape. Bridget's bringing the vehicle around." They moved to the building's edge. The fire escape was old iron, rusted, some steps missing entirely. Catherine didn't hesitate. She swung over, began climbing down, Grace right behind her. Behind them, more FSB agents burst onto the roof. Mike's voice crackled over the radio. "Engaging targets on your 6. His M40A3 spoke twice more, the suppressed shots barely audible across 400 yards. 2 more FSB agents dropped. Catherine and Grace reached the ground, sprinted through an alley. A battered Lada sedan screeched around the corner, Bridget at the wheel. Catherine and Grace dove into the back seat. The car was moving before the doors were closed. "Mike," Catherine said into the radio, "fall back to the secondary position. We'll pick you up in 3 minutes." "Negative," Mike said. His voice was tight with pain. "Overwatch position is compromised. They hit it with an RPG. I'm mobile, but I've got company. Make for the exfil point. I'll meet you there." "Mike, that's an order, Commander. I trained you better than to argue with me." The connection went dead. Catherine grabbed the front seat. "Bridget, secondary exfil point. Fast." The Lada's engine screamed as Bridget pushed it through streets that were starting to wake up. Early morning workers, delivery trucks, the normal flow of a city that had no idea 4 Americans had just killed 6 FSB agents in the heart of Sevastopol. Catherine pulled out the micro SD card, handed it to Bridget. "We need to know what's on this, now." Bridget took it, inserted it into her laptop, while still driving one-handed through traffic that was getting heavier by the minute. Grace watched the rear window, SIG P226, ready in case pursuit materialized. "Encrypted," Bridget said, "but it's old encryption, Soviet era. Give me a minute." The minute stretched to 5, while Catherine watched the city slide past, her mind already 3 moves ahead. They'd lost surprise. FSB knew Americans were operating in Sevastopol. That meant roadblocks, heightened security, and an exfil point that was probably compromised. "Got it," Bridget said. Her voice had gone flat. "Commander, you need to see this." Catherine leaned forward. The laptop screen showed folders, dozens of them, all labeled in Russian. Bridget clicked through them rapidly. "Operation Ghost Directive. It's all here. KGB program, 1975 to 1990. They embedded 37 sleeper agents in the U.S. military and government. Deep cover. Some of them went decades without being activated." "Names?" Catherine asked. Bridget opened a file. A spreadsheet appeared. Names in Cyrillic and English, photographs, assignments, handler codes. Catherine's eyes scanned down the list. She saw ranks, positions, dates of recruitment. Army colonels, Navy captains, CIA analysts, NSA technicians. A spiderweb of compromise that had reached into every level of American national security. Then she saw the name that made her blood freeze. Winterhawk. Vanessa Cortland, now Blackwood. Recruited 1979, Yale University. Handler, Colonel Dmitry Volkov. Current position, Deputy Director of Operations, CIA. Grace leaned over Catherine's shoulder, read the entry, swore in British profanity that would have made a sailor blush. "She's been KGB since 1979, Catherine said. The words felt distant, like someone else was speaking them. "For 45 years. Bridget opened another folder. Assassination records, Jesus. They've got files on everyone they killed to protect the network. She clicked on a file. Catherine read the name before Bridget could warn her. Patrick Sullivan. Date, October 25th, 1983. Location, Point Salines Airport, Grenada. Operator, Winterhawk, Vanessa Cortland. Method, .45 caliber, single shot to back during combat confusion. Reason, Subject discovered preliminary evidence of ghost directive during document recovery operation. Subject photographed classified materials. Elimination necessary to protect network. The next file was equally brutal. Brennan Sullivan. Date: December 15th, 1989. Location: Unter den Linden, Berlin, Germany. Operator: Winterhawk. Method: vehicular accident, staged brake failure. Reason: subject continued investigation after son's death. Subject had identified 3 potential sleeper agents, posed imminent threat to network integrity. Catherine stared at the screen. Her father, her grandfather, both murdered by the same woman. Both killed because they'd gotten too close to the truth. There's more, Bridget said quietly. She opened a third file, recent, dated 2021. Syria Operation. SEAL Team 5 compromised by Winterhawk. Mission parameters leaked to hostile forces 48 hours before execution. 8 casualties. Primary target, Commander Catherine Sullivan. Status: failed. Sullivan survived. Subsequent cover story: intelligence failure, no fault assigned. Catherine's hands were shaking. Vanessa Blackwood had killed her father, her grandfather, and her entire team. 3 generations of Sullivans, all targeted by the same Russian agent. Commander, Grace said, look at this folder. Winter Ghost Protocol. Bridget clicked it open. Catherine read fast, her training allowing her to process the tactical details even as rage built in her chest. Winter Ghost Protocol. Classification: highest. Activation condition: when ghost directive exposure imminent. Objective: eliminate all witnesses and evidence through mass casualty event targeting U.S. military leadership. Target: Arlington National Cemetery, Veterans Day Ceremony, November 11th, 2024. Time: 10:30 hours Eastern Standard Time. Assets: 12 sleeper agents activated. Payload: drone swarm, 100 micro-drones modified with C4 explosive. Target zone: VIP section containing President, Secretary of Defense, Joint Chiefs of Staff, senior military leadership. Estimated casualties: 280 to 320. Cover story: terrorist attack by domestic extremists. Evidence of ghost directive destroyed in subsequent investigation. Catherine checked her watch. November 9th, 6:15 a.m. local time. The ceremony was in 68 hours. She's going to decapitate the entire military leadership, Grace said. Blame it on terrorism. In the chaos, ghost directive stays buried forever. We have to warn someone, Bridget said. FBI, Pentagon, someone. Who? Catherine's voice was sharp. Vanessa controls CIA communications. She's deputy director. Who exactly do we call that she can't intercept or discredit? The Lotta turned onto a coastal road. Ahead, the harbor spread out, morning sun beginning to turn the water silver. The submarine exfil point was 2 miles ahead. Catherine's encrypted phone buzzed. She answered. Sullivan. Alexander Cordell's voice was tight with stress. Where are you? En route to exfil. Volkov's dead, but we have his files. I know. Vanessa just issued a termination order. All 4 of you are considered hostile operators. I can't protect you. Every asset in theater has orders to kill on sight. Catherine felt the world narrow to a single point of absolute clarity. She's KGB, Cordell. Since 1979. It's all in Volkov's files. She killed my father, my grandfather, my team in Syria, and in 68 hours she's going to blow up Arlington Cemetery. Silence on the line. Then, Jesus Christ, we're uploading the files to you now. Bridget, send everything to Cordell's secure server. Bridget's fingers flew. Uploading. It'll take 5 minutes. Cordell, Catherine said. You need to stop her from your end. Arrest her. Lock down Arlington. Do something. I can't. She outranks me. And without physical evidence, without Volkov's testimony, it's my word against hers. The director won't believe me without proof I can put in his hands. Cordell's voice cracked slightly. Catherine, Winter Ghost is real. NSA picked up chatter about drone components, but Vanessa's blocking every investigation, claiming it's Russian disinformation designed to disrupt the ceremony. She's got the director convinced I'm paranoid. She's covering her tracks perfectly. Then we stop it ourselves. You're 4 people against an entire sleeper network, and you're wanted by U.S. intelligence. How exactly? The call cut off. Bridget looked up from her laptop, face pale. They jammed us. Military-grade jamming. We're cut off. Catherine looked ahead. The harbor was visible now, and so were the ships. Russian Navy corvettes, at least 3 of them, positioned exactly where the submarine was supposed to pick them up. The exfil point is burned, Grace said. They're waiting for us. Catherine made a decision. Bridget, commercial ferry options to Turkey? Bridget pulled up schedules on her laptop. 1 ferry to Istanbul, leaves in 90 minutes. Turkish authorities won't help us either, Grace pointed out. We're wanted by CIA now. But Turkey is NATO, Catherine said. Vanessa can't order Russian hits on Turkish soil without causing an international incident. We get to Istanbul, find a hole, contact Cordell again, figure out how to stop Winter Ghost. They ditched the Lada 3 blocks from the ferry terminal, walked separately to the ticket counter, bought passage with the fake passports that CIA had provided. The irony wasn't lost on Catherine. She was using Vanessa's resources to escape Vanessa's trap. The security checkpoint was the moment of maximum danger. Catherine handed over her passport, fake name Jennifer Walsh, smiled at the Ukrainian guard. He scanned it, looked at his computer screen. His eyes widened slightly. Catherine's hand moved toward the concealed SIG P226 in her jacket. Behind her, she felt Mike tense. He'd made it to the ferry terminal, limping slightly, his jacket torn, but alive. The guard looked at Catherine for a long moment. She looked back, keeping her face neutral, showing nothing. The guard stamped the passport. Enjoy Turkey, Miss Walsh. Catherine exhaled, walked through. The others followed without incident. On the ferry, they found a private cabin, locked the door, and for the first time in 18 hours stopped moving. That guard saw the alert, Grace said. Why did he let us through? Because someone paid him, Mike said. He was cleaning a cut on his forearm, wincing. Question is who? Catherine pulled out the micro SD card again, plugged it into Bridget's laptop. A new folder had appeared, one that hadn't been there before. It must have auto-downloaded when they'd connected to the internet at the ferry terminal. She opened it. A single video file. Catherine clicked play. A woman appeared on screen. Late 50s, attractive in a cold way, wearing an expensive suit. Vanessa Blackwood. Commander Sullivan, the recording said, if you're watching this, then you survived Sevastopol. Congratulations. That puts you ahead of your father and grandfather. Catherine felt Mike's hand on her shoulder steadying. Vanessa continued. The files you have are real. Ghost Directive exists. I've been KGB and later SVR since I was 22 years old. Your father discovered evidence in Grenada. I killed him. Your grandfather continued the investigation. I killed him too. Your team in Syria got close to connecting me to a weapons deal that would have exposed my network. I had them eliminated. You were supposed to die with them, but you're remarkably difficult to kill. I respect that. The recording showed Vanessa standing, walking to a window that overlooked Langley. Winter Ghost is proceeding as planned. In 67 hours, Arlington will burn. 300 American military leaders will die. The evidence of Ghost Directive will be destroyed in the chaos, and you, Commander, will be blamed as the terrorist who orchestrated it. We've already prepared your manifesto. Disgruntled veteran, PTSD, anti-government extremism. The narrative writes itself. Catherine's jaw clenched so hard her teeth hurt. You can't stop it, Vanessa said. You're wanted by every intelligence agency. You have no resources, no support, no proof that anyone will believe. The drones are already in place. The sleeper agents are activated. It's over. Your father lost. Your grandfather lost. And you will lose. The only question is whether you die trying to stop it or whether you run and live with the knowledge that you failed. Vanessa turned back to the camera. I trained you well, Catherine. Every skill you have, I helped cultivate. Every mission you ran, I approved. You were my greatest success story. The perfect operator created from the ashes of the men I killed. There's a beautiful symmetry to it, don't you think? The video ended. The cabin was silent except for the rumble of the ferry's engines. Outside the small porthole, Istanbul was appearing on the horizon, minarets and bridges catching the morning sun. Catherine stood, moved to the porthole, looked out at the city. She thought of her father, young and confident, never knowing he'd have a daughter. She thought of her grandfather, OSS operative who'd fought Nazis and survived the Cold War, only to die in a staged accident. She thought of the 8 SEALs who died in Syria, trusting that their mission was righteous, never knowing they'd been betrayed from the start. We have 67 hours, she said, not turning from the window. That gives us time to get back to the U.S., get to Arlington, and stop this. How? Bridget asked. We're flagged at every port of entry. The second we land, we're arrested. Then we don't land legally, Grace said. My SAS contacts can get us on an RAF cargo flight to Joint Base Andrews. No customs, no passport control. Diplomatic immunity extends to military transports. Catherine turned back to the team. Mike, can you still shoot? The old Master Chief smiled, though it looked more like a wolf baring its teeth. I'm 71 years old, and I just got hit by an RPG. But yeah, I can still shoot. Good, because in 67 hours we're going to war with a Russian sleeper network that's been embedded for 45 years. We're going to save Arlington Cemetery. We're going to stop Winter Ghost. And we're going to make Vanessa Blackwood pay for every single person she's killed. The 4 of us against 12 activated sleeper agents and an entire CIA directorate, Grace said. Brilliant. I love impossible odds. Catherine looked at each of them. Mike, who'd been like a father when her real father was just a photograph. Grace, who'd followed her into hell on trust alone. Bridget, barely older than Catherine had been at BUD/S graduation, scared but steady. My father stood watch, Catherine said quietly. My grandfather stood watch. Every Sullivan who ever wore the uniform stood watch. Now it's our turn. We stand watch or we die trying. But we don't run. Sullivans don't run. Mike stood, moved beside her, looked out at Istanbul growing closer. Your daddy used to say something before every mission. Let's go do the impossible. Drove the chiefs crazy, but the men loved it. Catherine smiled for the first time in days. Then let's go do the impossible. The ferry docked in Istanbul at noon. 4 Americans walked off, carrying nothing but determination and the knowledge that in 66 hours they would either save their country or die with it. And somewhere in Langley, Virginia, Vanessa Blackwood watched their progress on a screen and smiled, because she believed she'd already won. She had no idea that she just made the mistake every enemy of the Sullivan family had made for 3 generations. She'd left Catherine alive. And Catherine Reaper Sullivan never lost twice. The RAF cargo transport touched down at Joint Base Andrews at 0340 hours on November 10th. 24 hours until the Veterans Day ceremony. 24 hours until Winter Ghost turned Arlington Cemetery into a mass grave. Catherine was first off the aircraft, stepping onto American soil for the first time in 3 years. The tarmac was dark except for the distant glow of runway lights. Grace had made good on her promise. No customs, no passport control, no record they'd ever left Turkey. Mike followed her down the ramp, moving slower than he had in Crimea. The RPG blast had cracked 2 ribs, and given him a concussion that doctors said should have killed a man his age. But Mike Delaney hadn't become a Master Chief by accepting what doctors said was possible. He still favored his left side slightly, Catherine noticed, but his eyes were clear and his hands were steady. Grace and Bridget came last, carrying duffel bags that contained everything they'd managed to acquire in Istanbul. Not much. Some civilian clothes, basic electronics, and 3 handguns purchased from a contact of Grace's, who asked no questions and accepted payment in cryptocurrency. They had no body armor, no rifles, no backup, no official sanction. They were 4 people against a network that had been preparing for this moment for 45 years. Mike's truck is still in long-term parking at Norfolk, Catherine said as they moved away from the aircraft. 4 hours drive. We can stage from his compound in the Outer Banks. That gives us less than 20 hours before ceremony start time, Grace pointed out. We need to recon Arlington, identify the drone launch point, locate the sleeper agents, and stop the attack. That's not a lot of time for 4 people. Then we don't sleep, Catherine said. They stole a pickup truck from the base motor pool. Catherine didn't like adding vehicle theft to their growing list of crimes, but they were already wanted for espionage, murder, and treason. One more charge wouldn't matter if they failed. The drive to Norfolk passed in tense silence. Catherine watched the eastern sky gradually lighten, dawn coming whether they were ready or not. She thought about her father, about the last morning he'd seen before Vanessa Blackwood put a bullet in his back. Had he known something was wrong? Had he felt the betrayal coming? Mike's compound appeared as the sun was fully up. 50 acres of pine forest and sand, surrounded by chain-link fence and no trespassing signs that had kept curious neighbors away for 30 years. The main building was a converted warehouse, part armory, part training facility, part home for a man who'd never really left the Navy. Inside smelled like gun oil and old wood. The walls were covered with photographs. SEAL teams from the 70s and 80s, young men with long hair and hard eyes. Catherine found her father in several photos, always grinning, always looking like he owned the world. Your daddy stood in this room the night before he shipped out to Grenada, Mike said, appearing beside her. We drank whiskey and talked about what we'd do when we got back. He wanted to take your mother to Paris, said she'd always wanted to see the Eiffel Tower. Did they ever go? He died 3 weeks later. Your mother was 2 months pregnant with you. She never knew. Catherine touched the photograph, her father's face frozen in time. We're going to finish this, Mike. For him, for Grandpa, for all of them. I know we are. Mike moved to a weapons locker, began unlocking the heavy steel door. That's why we're going to do it right. Inside the locker was enough firepower to supply a small military unit. HK-416 rifles, M4 carbines, Remington 870 shotguns, Glock 19s, and in a special case at the back, Mike's personal collection of weapons that officially didn't exist. Your grandfather's 1911, Mike said, lifting out a well-worn pistol. Carried it through every OSS operation in Europe. Normandy, Market Garden, the Bulge. He gave it to me in 1987, made me promise to give it to you when you were ready. Catherine took the pistol. It was heavier than modern firearms, the weight of history and blood and 3 generations of service. She checked the action, felt the smoothness of parts that had been maintained with religious dedication for 70 years. I'm ready, she said. They spent 2 hours preparing. Catherine and Grace cleaned and loaded weapons. Bridget set up a command center using Mike's computers and her own equipment, hacking into Arlington's security systems to pull blueprints and camera feeds. Mike made coffee and sandwiches, understanding that bodies needed fuel before a fight. At 1100 hours, Bridget called them over. Her laptop displayed a schematic of Arlington National Cemetery, overlaid with security camera positions and patrol routes. The ceremony starts at 1000 hours tomorrow, she said, wreath laying at the tomb of the unknown soldier. 21 gun salutes scheduled for 10:30. That's when the drones launch, according to the protocol. Launch from where? Catherine asked. Bridget pulled up a satellite image. Maintenance building, 400 yards northwest of the tomb. According to the work orders I found, it's been closed for renovations since November 5th. Perfect place to stage the drones. How many people have access? Grace asked. On paper, 8 cemetery maintenance workers, but I cross-referenced their names with Volkov's files. Bridget's face was grim. 4 of them are sleeper agents. They've been working at Arlington for years, waiting for activation. Catherine studied the layout. We need to get into that maintenance building before the ceremony. Disable the drones. But we can't do it tonight. Security will be at maximum alert the night before. We have to wait until tomorrow, during the ceremony, when security is focused on protecting the VIPs. That's insane, Grace said. We'll be operating in the middle of 3,000 people, with Secret Service and FBI everywhere. I know, Catherine's voice was calm, but it's the only way. They'll expect us to attack from outside. They won't expect us to walk right in during the ceremony itself. Mike leaned over the schematic. The VIP section is here, 50 yards from the maintenance building. Vanessa will be there. She'll want to watch it happen. That's her weakness, pride. Catherine nodded slowly. An idea was forming, dangerous and probably suicidal, but it was the only play they had. We split into 2 teams. Grace and I take the maintenance building, disable the drones. Mike and Bridget handle Vanessa. Handle how? Bridget asked. Mike will be in the VIP section with his legitimate credentials as a retired Master Chief. He can get close to her. You'll be in the surveillance van monitoring everything. When we disable the drones and she realizes the plan failed, she'll panic. Mike, that's when you make your move. And what move is that? Mike asked. You stop her from killing anyone else, one way or another. They spent the rest of the day planning every detail. Entry points, timing, contingencies. They war-game scenarios, argued tactics, refined approaches. By 2,000 hours, they had something that might work if everything went perfectly and they got impossibly lucky. Catherine didn't believe in luck. She believed in training and will, and she had both in abundance. At 0200 hours on November 11th, they loaded into Mike's truck and began the drive to Arlington. The cemetery was 200 miles north, through darkness and silence and the weight of what they were about to attempt. Catherine rode in the passenger seat, watching the highway unroll before them. She thought about all the operators who'd gone into impossible situations, knowing they probably wouldn't come back. Her father, her grandfather, the 8 men who'd died in Syria. Every SEAL who'd ever stepped off a boat or out of an aircraft into hostile territory with nothing but their skills and their brothers. You scared? Mike asked quietly. Terrified, Catherine admitted, but I'm more scared of failing, of letting them win. Your daddy told me once that courage isn't about not being afraid, it's about being scared and doing it anyway. Mike's hands were steady on the wheel. You've got that, Katie. You've always had that. They reached Arlington at 0600 hours. The cemetery was already active with preparation. Security teams checking routes, bomb-sniffing dogs clearing the grounds, television crews setting up cameras. The ceremony was 4 hours away. Catherine and Grace had fake credentials identifying them as cemetery maintenance staff, created by Bridget using stolen Arlington ID templates, and a laminator Mike had in his workshop. Mike had his legitimate invitation as a retired Master Chief and Medal of Honor recipient. Bridget would stay mobile, monitoring communications from a van parked 3 blocks away. They separated at the main gate. Mike went through VIP security, his credentials checking out, his age and rank making him exactly the kind of veteran the ceremony was meant to honor. Nobody looked twice at the old Master Chief with the cane and the slight limp. Catherine and Grace entered through the employee entrance, showed their fake IDs to a bored security guard who was more interested in his coffee than their faces. They were in. The maintenance building was exactly where the blueprints indicated. A squat, concrete structure, windows painted over, A single door with a numeric keypad. The renovation sign was prominently displayed, yellow caution tape cordoning off the area. Two guards inside, Catherine whispered, watching through binoculars from behind a maintenance shed 50 yards away. Probably two more we can't see, plus the drones. How long do you need? Grace asked. Catherine checked her watch. 08:15 hours. The ceremony would begin in 1 hour and 45 minutes. Get me inside. Give me 30 minutes. That's all I need. 30 minutes to disarm 100 drones. I learned EOD at the same school you did. I'm slower than you, but I'm not that much slower. Grace smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. If this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, if I don't make it, tell my mom I loved her. Tell her I died doing something that mattered. Catherine gripped Grace's shoulder. You're going to tell her yourself. Now let's move. They approached the maintenance building from the blind side, using a delivery truck as cover. Catherine had the SIG P226 with suppressor attached. Grace carried her MP5, also suppressed. They reached the door. Grace pulled out a handheld radio jammer, activated it. Any comms inside the building would be dead. Catherine picked the keypad lock in 45 seconds, a skill her grandfather had taught her when she was 12, practicing on the locks at Mike's compound. The door clicked open. They entered fast and low. The interior was a single large room, shelving and equipment pushed to the walls. In the center, arranged in neat rows, were 100 small drones. DJI Mavic 3S, modified with C4 charges attached to the undercarriage. Each drone carried enough explosive to kill anyone within 10 feet. 4 men stood around a control station. They turned as Catherine and Grace entered. Hands moved toward weapons. Catherine shot the first man twice in the chest before his hand reached his holster. Grace put a burst into the second. The third managed to draw, got one shot off that went wide, before Catherine dropped him with a headshot. The fourth raised his hands. Don't, he said in English with a faint Russian accent. I surrender. Grace covered him while Catherine moved to the control station. A laptop showed a map of Arlington, the tomb of the unknown soldier marked with a red X. A timer displayed in the corner. Launch in 98 minutes. Encryption? Catherine asked Bridget over the radio. Working on it, Bridget's voice crackled back. It's military grade, Russian FSB standard. I need time. Catherine looked at the rows of drones. She could destroy them manually, but that would take too long and make too much noise. She needed to disable them through the control system. The prisoner spoke. You cannot stop it. Even if you disable these drones, there are more. Backups. The plan has redundancies. Catherine walked over to him. Where? I won't tell you. Grace stepped close, pressed the MP5's barrel against his kneecap. You'll tell us or you'll never walk again. Your choice. Make it fast. The man's eyes showed fear for the first time. He looked at Catherine, perhaps hoping for mercy. He didn't find any. Truck, he said quickly. Panel van parked on Roosevelt Avenue. 50 more drones, staged as secondary assault if primary fails. Catherine radioed Bridget. Panel van, Roosevelt Avenue. Find it. On it. Catherine turned back to the control station. The laptop screen showed the encryption key prompt. She had no way to crack it in the time remaining. But she had another option. She pulled out the micro SD card from Crimea, the one with Volkov's files, inserted it into the laptop's USB port, started searching through folders. What are you doing? Grace asked. Volkov ran Ghost Directive. He would have had override codes, backdoor access to all their systems. Catherine's fingers flew across the keyboard. It's how the KGB operated. Always maintain control. She found a folder labeled Protocols. Inside, a text file with hundreds of codes. She scanned through them, looking for anything related to Winter Ghost. There. Winter Ghost abort code. 102583. Catherine stared at the number. October 25th, 1983. The date her father died. She entered the code. The laptop screen changed. Abort launch? Yes/no. She pressed yes. The drones powered down with a collective whine. The timer froze at 87 minutes. Catherine exhaled. Then the laptop screen flickered. New text appeared in Russian. Bridget's voice came through the earpiece, translating in real time as she monitored remotely. Abort code accepted. Secondary protocol activated. Self-destruct in 60 seconds. Grace, run! Catherine grabbed the laptop, sprinted for the door. Behind them, the C4 charges on the drones began beeping in unison. They crashed through the door, Grace right behind. Catherine dove behind a concrete barrier 50 yards away. The explosion wasn't as large as she'd feared. The charges were designed to be lethal at 10 feet, not to destroy buildings. But it was enough. The maintenance building's windows blew out, smoke and debris mushrooming into the morning air. Backup plan, Grace said, breathing hard. Even in failure, they destroy the evidence. Good thing I kept this. Catherine held up the micro SD card, still clutched in her hand. Volkov's files, everything we need. Primary threat neutralized, Catherine said into the radio. Bridget, status on the van? Found it, sending local police. Anonymous tip about a bomb threat. They're moving on it now. Catherine checked her watch. 08:47 hours. The ceremony would begin in 73 minutes. She and Grace had to get out of the area, blend back into the cemetery staff, and position themselves for the final confrontation. Grace, we move in 5 minutes. Let the scene settle. Then we walk out like we belong. They waited in silence, listening to the sounds of the cemetery coming to life outside. Security teams on radios, investigating the explosion, but finding only destroyed drones and dead sleeper agents. The distant sound of a military band warming up. The low rumble of motorcade vehicles arriving. At 08:52, they exited their hiding spot, moved separately toward different areas of the cemetery. Grace headed toward the employee parking area to establish a fallback position. Catherine moved toward the ceremony grounds, where 3,000 people were beginning to gather. The ceremony grounds were filling with people, veterans in dress uniforms, active duty military, politicians, families of the fallen. 3,000 people gathered to honor those who'd served. Catherine spotted Mike near the VIP section, standing with other elderly veterans, his cane making him look frailer than he was. She keyed her radio. Mike, I need a visual on Vanessa. Third row, VIP section, right side, black coat. She's got security around her, but not as much as the president. Catherine worked her way closer, staying in the crowd, just another face among thousands. She saw Vanessa now, 58 years old, looking elegant and composed, the perfect image of a senior intelligence official attending a solemn ceremony. The woman who'd murdered Catherine's father, who'd killed her grandfather, who'd orchestrated the deaths of 8 Navy SEALs, who'd spent 45 years betraying everything the people around her believed in. The ceremony began. The honor guard marched. A military band played. Speeches were given about sacrifice and service and the price of freedom. Catherine listened and thought about all the men and women who'd paid that price, while people like Vanessa Blackwood sold their souls for foreign intelligence services. At 10:15 hours, the wreath-laying ceremony concluded. The crowd stood for the 21-gun salute, scheduled for 10:30. That was when the drones were supposed to launch, when 300 American military leaders were supposed to die. Instead, nothing happened. The salute was fired. The crowd remained silent. No explosions, no chaos, no mass death. Catherine saw confusion flicker across Vanessa's face, saw her reach into her purse, pull out a phone, check it, saw the confusion turn to shock, then to cold rage. Vanessa stood, began moving toward the exit, security detail following. She was running. She knew the plan had failed. Catherine moved to intercept, pushing through the crowd. She was 20 yards away when Vanessa spotted her. Their eyes met across the distance. Recognition, understanding, hatred. Vanessa's hand moved toward her coat. Catherine saw it happening as if time had slowed. The way Vanessa's shoulder dipped slightly, the way her fingers disappeared into the dark fabric, the way her eyes locked onto the Secretary of Defense, standing 10 feet away, unprotected for this one moment while Secret Service focused on managing the crowd. Catherine was already moving, pushing through the dense cluster of veterans and officials. 20 yards, 15. Her hand found the 1911 under her jacket, her grandfather's pistol. 3 generations of Sullivans, all leading to this moment. Vanessa's hand emerged holding a Walther PPK, small, black, classic KGB. The barrel came up in a smooth, practiced motion. 45 years of training, 45 years of waiting for this moment. Catherine's 1911 cleared leather. No time to aim properly, no time for a perfect shot. Just muscle memory and faith. 10 yards between them, Vanessa's finger tightened on the trigger. Catherine fired. The .45 round crossed the distance in a fraction of a second, hit Vanessa's right shoulder, spinning her around. The Walther discharged into the air, the crack of the gunshot finally breaking the ceremony's silence. Then chaos erupted. Secret Service swarmed immediately, weapons drawn, shouting. The crowd scattered in panic. Catherine dropped the 1911, raised her hands. Federal operator, Catherine Sullivan, U.S. Navy. That woman is a Russian agent. Secret Service tackled Catherine anyway. She let them. Let them cuff her. Let them push her face into the grass. She could see Vanessa 20 feet away, also cuffed, bleeding from the shoulder, but alive. Then Alexander Cordell was there, flashing credentials, shouting orders. Stand down! These are my people! Stand down! The Secret Service agents looked confused but followed orders. They uncuffed Catherine, helped her up. Cordell moved to Vanessa, knelt beside her. Deputy Director Blackwood, he said formally, you're under arrest for espionage, treason, and conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent. Vanessa laughed, blood staining her teeth. You think you've won? You think this ends anything? Her eyes held something between rage and admiration. Your father said the same thing in Grenada. Right before I shot him, he said, this won't end with me. He was right. She looked directly at Catherine. I trained you, Commander. Every mission you ran, I was there. Every order you followed, I approved. You were my greatest creation, and you never knew. Catherine's jaw tightened. You didn't create me. You murdered my family. There's a difference. Is there? Vanessa's smile was cold. You're standing here because of me. Everything you are, every skill you have, exists because I pushed you toward this moment. I killed your father to forge your grandfather into my enemy. I killed your grandfather to forge you. And now look at you. Perfect operator, perfect weapon. She coughed, blood flecking her lips. Moscow thanks you for your service, Commander Sullivan. Catherine walked over, knelt so they were face to face. We have the entire Ghost Directive archive, Volkov's files, names, dates, operations, 45 years of treason. We have recordings of you ordering my death. We have the drones you tried to use today. We have 4 live sleeper agents in custody. She smiled without warmth. And we have your confession. I didn't confess to anything. You did, just now. You called them fake files, but we never told you what was in the files. You just admitted you knew about them. That's enough for a warrant, enough to search your home, your office, your communications. Catherine stood. You're done, Vanessa. My father sends his regards from the grave. Vanessa's face went pale. FBI agents were arriving now, swarming the VIP section. Cordell was coordinating, pointing out the other sleeper agents that Bridget had identified from Volkov's files. The entire network was being rolled up. 2 months later, Catherine stood in Arlington Cemetery on a cold December morning. The grounds were quiet, most visitors deterred by the wind and the threat of snow. She wore her navy dress blues for the first time in 3 years, the uniform she'd earned with blood and pain and loss. Mike stood beside her, still favoring his left side slightly. The RPG blast had cracked 2 ribs and given him a concussion that the doctors said should have killed a man his age. But Mike Delaney hadn't become a Master Chief by accepting what doctors said was possible. Grace and Bridget completed their small group, both also in uniform. Grace had been awarded the Intelligence Star. Bridget had been promoted to Chief Petty Officer. Bridget's work cracking Ghost Directive's encryption had led to the identification of 17 additional sleeper agents across NATO countries. MI6 and DGSE were still working through the names she'd uncovered. They'd all been officially recognized for stopping Winter Ghost, though the details remain classified. They stood at 3 graves, fresh flowers on each. Captain Patrick Sullivan, Medal of Honor posthumously awarded. Killed in action, Grenada. The headstone had been updated to reflect the truth. Not killed by Cuban forces, but murdered by a traitor. The record was finally correct. Colonel Brennan Sullivan, OSS CIA, Medal of Honor posthumously awarded. Killed in the line of duty, another correction. Another truth finally told. And beside them, a new memorial. 8 names carved in granite. The SEAL Team 5 operators who died in Syria, Catherine's brothers, finally recognized as victims of betrayal rather than combat casualties. I finished it, Catherine said quietly to the stones. Ghost Directive is destroyed. Vanessa's serving 15 consecutive life sentences. No parole, no appeals left. She tried to claim diplomatic immunity through Russia, but they disavowed her. Said they'd never heard of Ghost Directive. Left her to rot. Catherine's voice hardened. She'll die in a supermax cell, forgotten by the country she served and the one she betrayed. The wind carried her words away, but she felt certain, somehow, that they heard. That 3 generations of Sullivans could finally rest. What now? Mike asked. You've got your answers. You've got your justice. What does Commander Catherine Sullivan do next? Catherine thought about that. She'd spent 3 years dead, 3 years hiding, and then 2 weeks of violence and revelation that had upended everything she thought she knew about her family's history. Cordell offered me a position, she said. New unit, Ghost Hunter. Our job is finding the remaining threats from the Cold War. The sleeper networks, the buried secrets, the old sins that haven't been accounted for. Are you taking it? Catherine looked at her father's grave, looked at the date, 1955 to 1983, 28 years old when he died, younger than she was now. He'd never gotten to see his daughter, never known she existed, but he'd stood watch anyway. He'd fought for a country and a future he'd never personally see. Yeah, Catherine said, I'm taking it. Someone has to stand watch. Might as well be us. Us? Grace raised an eyebrow. All of you, if you want in. This team, together, finishing what our fathers and grandfathers started. Mike smiled, and for a moment Catherine saw the young SEAL from the photos on his wall. Your daddy used to say, let's go do the impossible. I think he'd be proud of you carrying on that tradition. Catherine saluted her father's grave, her grandfather's grave, the memorial for her fallen team. Then she turned away, began walking back toward the cemetery gates where their lives waited. Behind them, snow began to fall, dusting the graves in white. In spring, the grass would grow green over the stones. Visitors would come and read names and never know the full stories, never know what these men had sacrificed, what secrets they died protecting. But Catherine knew, and that would have to be enough. 3 generations of Sullivans had stood watch. 3 generations had fought enemies foreign and domestic. 3 generations had paid the price of freedom in blood and loss and lonely graves. Now it was Catherine's turn, not to die, not to sacrifice, but to live, to fight, to finish the work they'd started. She walked through Arlington's gates into winter sunshine, Master Chief Mike Delaney beside her, knowing that somewhere in the shadows, new threats were gathering, new enemies were plotting, new ghosts needed hunting. And Commander Catherine Reaper Sullivan was ready. She'd died once and come back. She'd lost everything and rebuilt. She'd faced down a Russian sleeper network and won. Whatever came next, she would handle it the way Sullivan's always had, with honor, with courage, with absolute conviction that some things were worth fighting for. The impossible was just another mission, and Catherine never failed twice.